We'll call this meeting of the Newark City Council Finance Committee to order. Members present are Mr. Bubb, Mr. Cost, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Marmy, and myself. We do have three pieces of legislation on our agenda. And the first piece of legislation is to consider resolution number 15-83, appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation. And the first section is dealing with a request of $6,746.25 for vehicle maintenance and uniformed overtime fire. And I see Chief Connor is approaching the podium.
The $4,748 was for damages to one of our fire apparatus as it was left outside at a vendor during cold weather, and we needed some pump work done to it. That money is we paid out of our own vehicle maintenance budget, just reimbursement for that. Also, the overtime is for the July 4th fireworks, the COTC, that they paid. We're just moving that back into our account.
Thank you, Chief. Motion. Motion, Mr. Bubb.
Second.
Second, Mrs. Floyd. Any questions or comments from the committee? Questions, comments from the audience? All those in favor, move this on full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Chief. Section 2 is dealing with it's a note renewal for $4 million for water projects, and our utility superintendent, Mr. Loomis, is making his way to the podium.
Yeah, this is just for the renewal, the notes that we have for the water portion of the downtown project, the water line portion of the downtown project. So we are noting that for a few years, then we'll issue bonds once the project is done, and plans to pay those off after that project is completed. So.
Motion by Mr. Cross.
Second.
Second, Mr. Bubb. Any questions for Mr. Loomis from the committee? Questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Loomis. Section 3 is dealing with the lead-based grant, $9,377.81, and Director Motter is at the podium.
Yeah, good evening. We're basically just trying to pay back some residual funds to the HUD department where the lead grants came from. The $1,925 actually goes back to the 2007 lead grant, and then the $74,5266 is part of the 09. We actually tried to send it back to them last year, and somehow they never got the check. So it's going to be a second try for this. But that's how that breaks down. That's what it's for.
Thank you, Director.
Motion.
Motion, Mrs. Floyd. Second, Mr. Bubb. Any questions or comments from the committee? Questions, comments from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving this on to full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. And our next, Section 4 is dealing with $94.84 for the Downtown Special Improvement Fund. Director Motters.
Again, just a housekeeping item. We had about $94.84 to reimburse back to Mr. Lehman. Actually was handling that account, and this is the residual we need to get back to him.
Motion, Mr. Bubb.
Second.
Second, Mrs. Floyd. Any questions or comments from the committee? Questions, comments from the audience? All those in favor, move this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Motter. Section 5 of this resolution is dealing with the probation improvement grant, and the amount is $11,848. Director Sad is at the podium.
Good evening. We received our first pay-in from our probation improvement incentives grant, and we would like to spend some of that money on our service contracts. We contract with LAP and Behavior Healthcare Partners. We'd like to start paying some of those bills.
Motion. Motion, Mr. Bubb. Second, Mr. Cost. Any questions or comments for the director? Questions or comments from the audience? All those in favor, move this on to full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you,
Thank you.
Director. Okay. Our next piece of legislation is to consider resolution number 1586, authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to prepare and submit applications to the Ohio Department of Public Safety for fiscal year 2015 Edward Byrne Justice Assistance Grant funding.
This is our resolution to allow us to submit an application for a police grant.
Motion, Mrs. Floyd.
Second.
Second, Mr. Bug. Any questions or comments for Ms. Gilks? Any questions or comments from the audience? All those in favor of moving this on to full council signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. And then our last resolution on our agenda tonight is to consider resolution number 1587, authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to prepare and submit to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development a one-year use of funds action plan along with an application for fiscal year 2016 federal community development block grant funds as required by 24 CFR Part 91.220 for various programs related to housing and community development. Ms. Gilks.
This is the annual resolution for our application for HUD funding.
Motion, Mrs.
Second.
Floyd. Second, Mr. Bug. Any questions or comments for Ms. Gilks? Questions or comments from the audience? All those in favor of moving this on to full council signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Gilks. Thank you all. That concludes the business of the Finance Committee. Next up is Service.
We'll bring the Service Committee meeting to order. Members present, Mr. Blake, Mr. Rath, Mr. Roletta, Mr. Bubb, and myself. The first resolution is resolution number 15-89, resolution appropriating real estate known as parcel number 054-280-590-00.000, Newark, Licking County, located at 174 Mount Vernon Road, Newark, Licking County, Ohio, authorizing the Director of Law to proceed with a complaint for appropriation in the Licking County Court of Common Pleas and declaring an emergency. Mr. Moorhead.
Yes, sir. This is the one parcel from our State Route 13D project, which we are currently working on, that we have tried to come to terms with the property owner for the right-of-way acquisition. Haven't been able to do that at this point, and so we're at the time here where we need to move forward with the complaint for the appropriation of the property to meet the ODOT deadlines for the funding and so forth. So we had, I think we had 12 total parcels up there that we were acquiring. This is the only one that we were not able to come to terms on. Any questions? I'll be glad to try to answer them.
What's the reason that we weren't able to come to terms? Is it lack of response or lack of agreement?
I think the property has several liens on it, and we're still going to continue to negotiate with the property owner and his legal counsel on that, try to come to some agreement on that, but the value of the liens on the property greatly outweighs the appraised value of the property.
Make a motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bubb, second by Mr. Rath. Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience? All those in favor of sending this on to full council signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. That moves on 5-0.
Thank you.
The second part of the Service Committee is the presentation by Joe Ebel, the Licking County Health Commissioner, to give his mid-year report.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm a little bit late this year, but it's been a busy summer, I think, for everybody, so I'm just glad to be able to come here and kind of give you an update. I would like to mention, because I always forget and don't think about it, but to compliment the city, the administration, some of the people I've seen come up here to the podium reminded me that I'm fortunate to have a good working relationship with a lot of the people that work here for the city, both the new fire and police chief. Been great to get to work with. Barbara was up here was at our office a couple weeks ago, giving ideas on grants. Worked with Mark Motter a lot. Also with Mr. Rhodes. So very thankful to have good people and responsive people in the administration locally that we're able to rely on and work together as a team. And it seems like we're always doing that, working together as opposed to working at odds. So just wanted to give them some well-deserved credit for their efforts. With it being summertime, as usual, mosquitoes have been an issue. This year, we had a wet June, which meant mosquito-laden July. So we had incredible numbers of mosquitoes. We do a lot of trapping in the summer to look for areas where we have high populations of mosquitoes, as well as then sending those mosquitoes in for testing to see if they have West Nile virus. I know I saw a couple traps this year where there were over 1,000 mosquitoes from one night's worth of trapping. Usually we would say, if it's over 100 or 150, then we have a problem. So there were some sky-high numbers. We didn't see much in the way of West Nile virus until, we saw one real early in the year. It was actually from May, I believe. That was from mosquitoes that had survived the winter and then kind of woke up when the weather warmed in the spring. And then we saw a gap until the end of July, first part of August, where West Nile started showing up again. And I think during the month of September, we had about 19 traps sites that came back with West Nile around the county, which is a very high number. So as it's kind of dried up, we've seen the total number of mosquitoes dropping off, but the number of the mosquitoes that are infected climbing. So normally what you'll see is the West Nile showing up in mosquitoes about a month or so before it might show up in people. And there have been a number of human cases across the state and a couple deaths. Fortunately, in Licking County so far, we haven't had any West Nile cases confirmed. But we do have some challenging areas out by Tamarack Drive in Newark. It's just every year we seem to have problems with mosquitoes and West Nile out there. And we're out there almost weekly during the summer trying to keep that under control. So it does allow us to kind of monitor those numbers, try to be as effective as we can with our spray, so we're not applying spray where we don't have a mosquito problem. And then also we're trying to do a good job of trapping after we spray, so we can see, we had 1,000 mosquitoes, we sprayed, it dropped down to 500. That's still too high, we need to spray again. Or we were at 150, it dropped to 25, we should be good for a couple weeks. So that's a lot of time-consuming effort goes into that, but I think it's important for disease control and also just the comfort of our citizens. We're always telling them to get out there and be active, but it's kind of hard to do if you're getting eaten alive when you're trying to go for a walk, especially this time of year as it starts getting dark earlier. Sewage, you've probably seen come up in the paper. There was a nice article over the weekend that the Advocate did, kind of in the regional paper, so it was us and Marion, I think, that were quoted in there. Statewide sewage rules took effect 1st of January. That was the first real update of the sewage rules since 2007, and that update lasted 6 months and was repealed. So it went back, after the middle of 2007, it went back to the 1977 rules. So realistically, in Ohio, the state bar was set in 1977 and hadn't been raised in all those years. In Licking County, we had passed our own rules in 2007 when the state rules were rescinded, and our rules are pretty much the same in many ways to what the new rules that took effect this year include. So If you're going to put in a sewage system, the soil has to be evaluated, determine how well that soil is going to take the water, if there's a seasonal water table or bedrock or those kinds of issues. So we make sure that we put in appropriate systems for the soil that's on the site, which helps make sure that we're not oversizing systems or that we're not forcing huge systems in on a lot that just is not going to work, because if you go out there before anyone ever builds a house, there's a puddle during the early part of the spring laying on the ground. If you add sewage to it, doesn't have anywhere to go. So those rules in a lot of ways didn't have much impact on us because we had updated. The one thing that the rules did include was a requirement for operation and maintenance of your sewage system. Well, it's always been required that you have to maintain your sewage system, properly. You can't let it fail or cause a nuisance or whatever. There was never a function in the code that required us to go back and check to verify to make sure that people actually were maintaining it. In a lot of counties, they did have existing programs that addressed aeration systems where they would go out and inspect those because they have a high failure rate. They're mechanical systems with an electric motor, and those things would break down and cause a lot of problems. In Licking County, they never implemented that program here. We did have one where we go out and do the same type of inspections for semi-publics, which are small commercial systems, anywhere from a church or a small place that might have basically a household sewage system in it because there's not very many employees, all the way up to something that might be treating 20,000 gallons of water a day through a package plant. So we've been going out for a long time doing those every year and making sure they're working properly. So this is a similar requirement now for residential, and it applied automatically to all new systems. Anytime you pulled a permit to put in a system or replace a system or anything after the first of the year, now that will follow with some type of an operation and maintenance requirement. The state left it up to us a little bit on how to administer that. They do have one strict requirement of the regulations was that you had to allow people the option of having somebody besides the health department do it. Have a qualified private contractor inspect it. So we couldn't say hey, it has to be inspected and it's $1,000. Basically it has. We'll say it has to be inspected by somebody. We can do it. In our case, we're proposing to charge $35 to inspect it. Or they can have a sewage pumper or somebody who's registered as a service provider do that. In some cases, the homeowner can be qualified. They can take the test and show they understand the sewage rules enough that they can report back to us on whether they're maintaining it properly on their own. So that in itself is not a big issue since we only issue a couple hundred sewage permits a year. The part that was a big issue is the requirement that the state wants us to have all the existing sewage systems in the county eventually under that same inspection program. And we don't even know for sure how many there are in the county. Probably somewhere between 25 and 30,000 sewage systems out there. In our case, we really don't have any records that go back past the 70s. So we're at a disadvantage there. Most of every other place I've worked before, we've had records going into the 40s and 50s, but in Licking County, I'm not sure how they did it back in the 60s, or if somebody just threw up, decided to clean up the office at one point and got rid of things. So, but that makes our job a lot harder when you don't have a permit to go out and say, oh yeah, the septic tank's in the backyard and there's a leach field and here it is. When you just walk out on a lawn and try to figure out what's there, that's a much larger undertaking. So we think that trying to get those systems in, might take us 20 years just to try to get around everybody eventually. So we're kind of doing them little by little. What we did was propose a list of 11 kind of subdivisions that we know have a lot of problems historically, where they have small lots, a lot of homes tightly packed together, and they have sewage systems, typically a lot of aerators, that then treat the wastewater, dump to a collector tile, and then dump out to the road ditch or to a ditch of some kind or a creek. And said, well, we'll work on these 11 first. That's probably going to take us a couple years. We'll hit those kind of high priority sites. And then we'll let some of the other ones trickle in as they fail, or we get complaints and they have to go out and make repairs under orders, or if they sell the house and have an inspection done because of their real estate transfer requirement on a loan or something, that inspector can send us the report and that would start it up. So that's kind of our plan, I guess, is to slowly work into it for the next couple of years, and then after we get those streets that we have, we've identified, and part of that was, we know because we have gone out to some of these areas in the past and had to write up, half the houses on the street because they weren't working, and then go back again and again and again. And in other cases, we had a committee of stakeholders, which included county commissioner, township trustees. We had sewage installers and pumpers and soil and water and different people that were on this committee that helped us come up with that list and help us develop the plan on how they thought we should kind of implement this county-wide rollout. And they also gave us feedback on the fees and things, because basically their guidance was, keep them reasonable. So we're looking at charging $15 for an operating permit renewal. If you have an aerator system, that kind of a system, a permit would be good for 1 year for $15. If it's a septic tank, it would be good. That $15 would be good for 3 years. So depending on what kind it is, a little over $1 a month, or much less than $1 a month if it's over 3 years. And then the inspection is the same. They either have to have an annual inspection if it's a mechanical aeration system, or once every 3 years if it's a septic tank. And hopefully they just have the septic tank pumper come out and pump the tank every 3 years, and that would kill two birds with one stone, and we wouldn't even have to go out on those. But if we do have to go out and do the inspection, it would be $35 to do that. So if they chose to just have us handle it all, it would be $15 for the permit, $35 for an inspection, $50 every 3 years, or $50 a year if we have to go out every year and check their aerator. And the rationale with that is, we've went out for the past couple of years and done some subdivisions that we knew were on this list, and found one we did last year, 36% of the aerators we inspected were failing at the time. About another third of them weren't working right. They hadn't completely failed, but they still weren't actually up to code. So basically a third or less were really working properly. Septic tanks, much better compliance. I think 9% of the systems were failing, and so much better there. Back around 2005, we went out and did 800 sewage systems all around the county in a year, and to try to look and see, okay, well, we've been putting systems in, what's actually working and what's not. Since we were just putting them in, and last time we saw them, they were open trenches. And we're not getting, not going out to check to make sure they're working properly and being effective. So we did that 800, and at that time we found about 20% or 26% of the aerators, I think it was, were failing in that survey. And then a smaller number of the septic tanks, less than 10%, were failing. So it kind of follows with that's why we decided, annually on an aeration system, because they just do fail because they're mechanical, and 3 years on a septic. And part of it is, the older the system is, obviously the more likely it is to fail. So the subdivision we did last year that had a high failure rate had a lot of systems that were 50 years old. So you would expect to have that fail at a higher rate as opposed to the 800, where we tried to avoid getting really old or really new systems in the mix to get kind of a better snapshot of what systems typically look like after 10 to 25 years. So that'll be a challenge for us next year to try to get that implemented. In the city of Newark, none of the streets that are on our list are in Newark. Obviously, there are some areas, pockets in Newark that don't have sewer, which I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that you would think in the city that pretty much every street would have sewer lines, but they don't. So eventually we'll have to work with those, but we're working already with the stormwater department here and their MS4 requirements for their stormwater monitoring and illicit discharges, because they have to monitor all that for EPA requirements anyway. So that they're supposed to have it, report to the EPA, all those individual systems are working or not. And then also, once we've identified them, just we'll eventually be able to make sure that they're working, or, work with the sewer department on whether, extending a lateral is a possibility or something in some of these areas that just got skipped at some point over the years. I actually just got an email because of the newspaper article about a street, Berwyn, that's up off of Londondale up that way. That somebody complained because they live out there and they're smelling sewage in the creek, the little stream that's behind their house, and I assumed that street had sewers, but apparently not. So we'll be going out to check on that one. But most of the systems that are in the city don't discharge their soil absorption. A lot of dry wells, especially in the north end, which aren't really up to the current code anymore, but as they begin to fail, we'll have to start dealing with those because the lots are so small. It makes replacing it with a system that's up to the current standards pretty hard to do. So whenever possible, if we're running into that issue, then that's where we work and see, is there a plan on how we can figure out how to get this area addressed without having to force people to put in real expensive systems or do a lot of work. And that's what Jackson Town is just finishing up their project, because they had the same thing, a lot of very small lots with failing systems, and you just can't put in a leach field if you've got a quarter-acre lot and the house goes from the sidewalk to the alley. There's not much of any soil to work with on that, so we're more than willing to work on long-term planning to try to address those issues as well. Other than that, the enhanced enforcement program, I think I mentioned last year, we're really working well with that in the food operations, where we'll go in and kind of ratchet up the enforcement on some places where we've had problems just year after year after year, to really kind of bring them in. They have to face me. They eventually have to go before the board for a license hearing. So we've gotten some of those places where we've had chronic issues, but to actually kind of turn things around, turn the culture around in those operations. If you just go back every 6 months and write them up again, they learn pretty quickly that all you're going to do is come back in 6 more months and write them up again. There's no repercussions. So with this enhanced enforcement, we have to put in a lot more effort and start do more frequent inspections once we've identified one of these operations, but then work with them on education and enforcement to make sure we get them into compliance. Because when it comes down to it, if they're not going to operate properly, then they shouldn't be operating. And certainly public health and with food safety, you can make a lot of people sick in a hurry if you're not doing a good job. So that's all I had to cover. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Joe, I heard recently on the radio something about a respiratory disease outbreak. Do you know anything about that?
Well, there's a few different things going on. There's some avian, the bird flu that's driving up the price of eggs, and they worry about whether that'll cross into humans. We had a lot of the fairs that shut down parts of their shows. We had the swine flu over hogs that was an issue. So there's a few things that are out there that are potential problems, nothing that we've seen here locally. So hopefully it'll continue that way. We are starting to get into flu season, so we're beginning to just start seeing a few of those cases trickle in, and we're starting now to do our flu clinics, which we're actually basically any time you can walk in or call and get a flu shot in our office. It's the same flu shot for the most places that you'll be able to get at Walgreens or wherever. I always think I'd rather get a shot from a nurse than a pharmacist. So, not that I like getting shots to begin with, so I'm a little more picky, I guess, than some people. But certainly encourage you to, one place or another, to get those flu shots.
Any questions,
Mr. Chair. Joe, I just was curious. First of all, I appreciate you coming and giving us an update on the report that you do. something that is just, I mean, since I've been on council, you've come periodically to give us these updates and things. Recently, we get questions all the time about, this, you're an example of a city service that we used to provide and then we've given to the county. I quickly was going through, I guess there's an 11-page contract that council voted on in 2008 that enters into this agreement with the county. And so, I mean, is there any way, I mean, is there stipulations in that agreement or something that maybe at your future next visit to this committee you can say, okay, these are what the contract says that we're supposed to be providing, and these are, some measurable things about what it is in that contract that you have to provide, and to get a better understanding as to, I guess, accountability is what I'm looking at. I mean, we're getting all kinds of questions about, we're going to give a service to the county, how is the council making sure that there's accountability to Newark citizens? I mean, just making sure that health services are provided adequately to our residents as we've entered into that contract.
Yeah, and actually, like I said, it was 2008, and that was a 5-year contract, and then it was renewed. A revised contract was adopted after that, and I think the current one runs until January 1st, 2018.
Okay, so there was another. Okay, I must have an old one then. So
in the original one, because there were those concerns, they said, they had a table in the back that said, well, you have to do all these programs because the city helped did them.
Yeah.
And so we did that, and then when we revised it, they basically got rid of that table and just said, provide public health services in the city, which to me made a lot more sense than saying, well, just because somebody did something 10 years ago doesn't necessarily mean that's the best use of resources currently. So, I guess in that regard, I would say, if you're going to be looking at outsourcing services, you do need to look at, to some degree, comparing how it was before versus how it is after. But also, how it was before is not always, the top. So I think, based on what the services are, what kind of complaints you get from the citizens, you can go through our reports, but, it'll tell you how many people we vaccinated and all that, but that doesn't really tell you a whole lot as far as are we meeting the need. So, for some programs, it's probably a lot easier to pull numbers together. In our case, like with Medicaid expansion, we're happy to lose clients because now they have insurance and they can go to a doctor as opposed to coming to the safety net and just having to get free services through us. But those kinds of things influence it quite a bit. And obviously here with the city, the property maintenance is probably the biggest program as far as being something that the citizens notice if you're not doing a good job on, and they're happy to let you know. So I think that the property maintenance, the city maintained that because that part they thought was important and they needed to keep control over it. Before the merger, up until a couple of years before the merger, the city health department at one point ran that, and then it moved over into the city and they maintained it. So there's a lot of, some things where you might be able to say this is something that we think we need to maintain control over. And then, with other things, it just doesn't make sense to have two operations side by side or duplicating services. And that's the same case we run into even outside of intergovernment things where, we have private providers and nonprofits that may be providing services that we want to provide too, and you have to kind of say, well, is that good use of our resources to, if there's really a gap because there's not enough services to go around, then it makes sense. But if we're just competing with some other provider, then it doesn't, then that's probably not the way we should be spending our time and money. So it's complex, and all I can say is, if you keep an eye on it and reach a point where you're comfortable, it can be very effective. But like everything else, you have to continue to keep an eye on it. Even these reports, the contract I think says I do it annually. Report to the council or to the committee here, but we've just left it at every 6 months, just because you guys are always happy to see me, I guess. But, so, I mean, you can always go above what the contract says and ask for a little bit more, and usually that's not going to be a problem.
Well, Mr. Sheriff, could you forward the current, because I got an old one, so
Yeah.
if you could forward to the committee the current one.
Anything else?
Any other questions from the committee? Do we need to vote if we're happy to see Joe every 6 months?
I think that would be unanimous.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Yes, ma'am. Would you- Yes, name and address, please. Thank you.
Anna Reel, 1293 Granville Road. My question is to Mr. Abel. Just real quick, I understand that there are 2 meetings that the Health Department will be holding to help educate the public regarding the septic tank issues and any concerns, which I believe is this Wednesday and on the 30th. Is that correct?
Yeah, on the sewage, last week I had a meeting with Granville Township. Tonight, obviously, we're here. Wednesday, we're in Pataskala, Licking Heights, to talk to them about this operation and maintenance requirement, and then, I don't know if it's the week after, there's a second date.
Right. My question is, though, has all the elected officials in Newark and also in Licking County been notified so that they have an opportunity to attend? And if so, if not, is that possible?
I think just what's been in the paper for the most part, Chad Brown's my environmental director, he could probably tell you.
Basically, what we committed to doing was, in these 11 areas, you want me to go up there?
Sure, if you could.
Yeah, sure.
We have a crowd up there.
I'm not used to the official rules. So,
It's all right, we aren't either.
my name is Chad Brown, Licking County Health Department Environmental Health Director. Basically, what we did with the 11 areas that are the target areas right now, we committed to elected officials in those areas that we would come to them and do a public meeting before doing any inspections. And then, like we're going to Pataskala now, then next we'll pick another political subdivision. Right now, there's nothing in the city of Newark on that list. So, nothing within the city limits at this point. What we would do, we'd definitely come to you prior to doing any inspections in the city. We'd have a public meeting. We'd meet with any one of you, individually or at an open session, however you think would be best. Then we'd have a public meeting at the library or wherever, again, you think would be best. But at this point, what we didn't want to do is come here and tell people and then see them in 10 years. If we're not going to be doing the inspections. We're going to try to get, like Joe said, it probably take us about 2 years to get these 11 areas done right now. Once we get them done, then we'll figure out a plan on how to get the rest of the county in. But as we come to different political subdivisions, we'll have a public meeting there to do the education and to update folks as we go forward. So, you guys definitely won't be left out.
Okay, my concern right now is when it starts that the more people that are aware of it, the better it will be, because I still think there's a lot of people that don't read our papers or aren't aware of these new rules, and the more people needs to be educated on it. So that's just my concern, my question. My main concern was that our councilman might have an opportunity to attend Wednesday or the following Wednesday.
Certainly. Yeah, it's an
Okay.
open meeting. You guys
All
are
right.
more than welcome to attend. Again, one's Wednesday, one's the 30th at Licking Heights High School, 7 p.m. In the auditorium. If you guys want to come, more than welcome to be there. I think a couple commissioners will be there. I think Representative Ryan's coming. And then, of course, the city leadership in Pataskala as well, that's where we're focused in. But you're more than welcome to attend the public meeting. So, absolutely. Or, like I said, if you want me to come to an open session or just have a meeting, wherever, I'm open to doing whatever you guys need.
But the meeting coming up does not apply to the city of Newark, is that what you're saying?
At this point,
Okay.
what we're looking at is we're going to start the inspections in Pataskala, so we're trying to target those folks first, and then have them come to the meeting. We're having 2 meetings so they can come. But again, there's nothing within the city of Newark right now on the list.
And you project that to be approximately when? I want to make sure I understood that too.
We're probably looking at, for these 11 areas on that list, probably 2 years to get them all done. It takes some time. We don't, I don't have a whole lot of staff either, so it takes some time to get that ramped up.
So 2 years before you would get to the city of Newark.
And at that point, I don't even know, because then we're going to get this part done, and then we'll develop a plan to get the rest of the county. So, and again, we'll come to you guys for feedback. We have that stakeholder group. We'll get feedback. I'm open to any feedback, because the more we're working together, the better we are.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
I think that's it. I just wanted to make sure, but I believe the more and the sooner that we're all informed and really understand this new rule, the better off that we are. That's just my concern, but at least now you know that there are 2 meetings that you have an opportunity to attend. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Ellington?
Don Ellington, 984 Sharonview Drive. I've asked this question before, and I know you're not going to like it, along with Jeremy's question, but have you made any progress in the, like for the permits, the shots, the tests, in narrowing down 43055 actual City of Newark folks and not City of Newark folks in your results?
No, I think right now we're still just counting 43055. We did buy a new electronic health record software that we started in May, so we're still implementing. So there might be a way, it's stuff we have to get down to like the longer digit zip code or something maybe to be able to do a cross-reference, but sometimes you can just get a zip code for people's stuff. If you ask them what political subdivision they live in, it's usually, they scratch their head. Not sure what you're, because they just said Newark.
Any other questions from the audience? Okay, we just like to thank Mr. Reed. Thank you, sir, both. Thank you. Coming in this evening. And I believe that's all we've got for the service committee. Next, we have economic development.
Okay, we'll call the Economic Development Committee meeting to get to order. Those present are myself, Jeff Rath, Bill Cost, Jeremy Blake, Curtis Johnson, and sitting in for D. Hall is Carol Floyd. Up first, consider resolution number 1584, declaring the periodic review of Joint Economic Development Zone 1 contract unnecessary and canceling the review meeting between the City of Newark and the Board of Trustees of Etna Township, Ohio. Here to speak on that is Mr. Maurer.
Good evening again.
Director.
I thought the law department did a really nice job of summarizing this for you in the resolution. Basically, I'll paraphrase, there is a contract between the City of Newark and the JEDZ 1, and in that contract it provides for a 10-year meeting to take place between the City of Newark City Council and the JEDZ Board. Also, as it says, there is a provision to cancel that if it's determined that it's really not necessary. I can tell you, Stuart Moynihan has served diligently on that board for the last number of years. He's been the Secretary-Treasurer for the last 2 years. I've been attending as many of those meetings as I can periodically. I can tell you it's functioning well. There aren't any addendums needed to the contract or amendments needed to the contract. And I think, therefore, that's why you see in your paperwork, you've got a copy of the Etna Township Board's resolution number 1508-15-02, where Mr. Carlisle is president, Randy Four is vice president, and Jeff Johnson is trustee, were unanimous in the fact that they did not feel that the follow-up meeting was necessary. Any questions?
We don't have that, what you said.
I'm sorry?
What you just said, I don't have that.
In your paperwork, you didn't have a copy of Newark's resolution, Jeremy? And/or the... You don't have the... Okay, I did print out a copy of the Etna Township.
We just have to...
And, I talked with Autumn the other day in preparing for this, and I know she's the one that sent me a copy of it, so maybe I made an assumption.
All I have is this.
You don't even have Newark's resolution?
No.
Is that right? That might be a clerk of council question for you to follow up with. I could share this with you, but okay, I apologize. I assumed you had the same thing I had. But it is a well-written resolution, and I'd be glad to go in more detail if that'll help you at this time.
Everybody?
But the long and the short of it is like I just discussed. There is a contract. It provides for every 10 years, I guess, or the first 10 years to have a meeting to see if there is any discussion needed. In that contract, there's also provision to rescind that 10-year meeting. And the JEDZ committee did invoke that criteria, that requirement that they could waive that meeting. They did a resolution as was called for in the contract, which I have a copy of here, and it is signed. And then, because they created that resolution, voted on that resolution, they then sent it to the City of Newark's Law Director Department, where they then initiated the resolution to basically comply with their request, and that is to waive that meeting.
Mr. Ellington?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I talked to Mr. Carlisle at length, who heads up the JEDZ board. We missed the date to automatically waive this meeting. You had to do it before the 10 years, and we're past the 10 years. They have passed their resolution saying they don't feel like we need a meeting, everything's going fine. They want us to pass a resolution also, and that will give us, then we'll go another 10 years until we meet again. But that's kind of the gist of it. We kind of missed the date to automatically cancel it, so there we are.
All right. I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Johnson. Seconded by Mrs. Floyd. Any other questions from committee members? Mr. Claus?
Could we just get that emailed to us so we have that information?
I'd be glad to do that, Bill, or if you want to have the clerk, Autumn,
Just
do
so we
that.
get the information.
Autumn can email that to us. And we
Mr.
can have it
Ellington,
before we
do you
vote.
have both the Newark City resolution and the Newark City? Okay, and I know Autumn has a copy of the
Yeah, Mr. Ellington,
JEDZ.
if you make sure that Autumn has that email to us before the council meeting that we have to vote on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee members? Any other questions, comment from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0.
Thank you.
No other issues before the Economic Development Committee. This committee will be adjourned. Up next will be capital improvements. Okay, we'll call the Capital Improvements Committee meeting to order. Those present are myself, Jeff Rath, Curtis Johnson, Bill Cost, Alex Roletta, and sitting in for D. Hall will be Carol Floyd. We have one issue before us tonight. Consider Resolution 15-88, appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation. Here to speak on that issue is our Service Director, David Rhodes. Mr. Rhodes, what say you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I first got appointed Service Director, it was brought to my attention that we had a software that ran our traffic lights that was outdated, and it needed to be updated. So we began to look to see what the best alternative would be, and we settled on a software called Tactics, and it has a lot of the same characteristics as our current software, but it's updated. Our current software is not supported by Windows 7 anymore, which means we've got a lot of band-aids just to keep it up and running. At first brush, the software was $70,000. And we negotiated, and as with all software, if you negotiate long enough and you let them sit long enough, they will drop their price. The total price for this project's $33,000, and they wanted $7,000 to install it, but we're going to be able to install it ourselves. It seems pretty simple to install. And what I negotiated was 3 payments of $11,000. But this software will do things like traffic monitoring, failed intersections pages, critical data, which is like the timing on the intersections, car counts that goes through intersections. It can also do things for the engineering department, which will do analysis on traffic counts and even give proposed diagrams for maybe proposed new traffic flow off of this based off the counts. We can do remote fixes with this new software from a cell phone or from an iPad or from a computer. If we have a failed intersection, it will bring us current and up to date. And the first year, we're going to take the dollars out of capital improvements, and as we look at the budget, maybe I can get this in the supplies or maintenance of the street traffic department budget, but we'll look at that as we move forward.
Since we're installing this ourselves, if it is not as easy to install as it appears, what what type of, because we're installing ourselves, what type of service and support do we have?
We'd have Mr. Carson from Alpha Link come over as well as the sales rep, and they would help us.
You feel that's ample?
Yeah, I do.
Is there a service contract that we're avoiding?
We are. We are.
To what cost?
About $15,000.
Any other questions from anybody else in the committee? I saw a flinch. Just a flinch. Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Johnson, seconded by Mr. Cost. Any questions from the floor? Council members on the floor or in the audience?
I do.
Mr. Cost.
When you talk about being able to do traffic count, would that be for an intersection that does not have a light of any sort, or would it be able to read, is there any way to read to determine a need for a light with a system like this?
Well, it would, no, we would do that study further in-house. This would merely send out information for traffic counts, possibly different timing. You know, you and I have spoke many times about the 21st Street. This would send out the indicators on when things are backed up further, and currently they are backed up further because of the closure that we have on Country Club. But this software would send out suggestions of timing patterns of different lights.
Any other questions? A question from the back of the room.
Yeah, how does it determine?
I'm sorry, could you, hold on a second. I apologize. You're going to have to come up front and give your name and address, please.
We're going to get in the camera.
Yes.
We are going to get you on camera.
Eric McKay, 255 Upton Down Road, Newark. How does it determine what the traffic flow is like? Is it cameras or what?
It's sensors that is in the lights themselves.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Yes.
Rusty White, 1409 Residence Drive, Newark, Ohio. A couple of questions. One is there going to be other equipment required, servers, computers, other than the software itself? The other is how much is it going to cost the city itself to do what $7,000 would do if they did it? And time frames, would they do it a lot quicker than it's going to take the city?
The first answer is no. We don't need any additional computers. And the second answer to that is with the staff we have on staff, they've got the time to install this themselves.
So they have nothing to do.
I didn't say that.
Put in that $7,000.
I said they have the time to do it themselves. I did not feel as though the additional $7,000 was a good use of taxpayer dollars.
Okay. Time frame?
Oh, to put it in?
Yeah.
Probably 2 days.
2 days?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. This does not need expedited, I assume?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And seeing no other issues before the Capital Improvements Committee, this meeting stands adjourned. And that concludes our committee meetings for this evening.